welcome to The Artful Chef. Today in our class we are learning about chalk pastels. If you are not familiar with chalk pastels, we are going to be using the Prismacolor brand. I'm going to link a description in the description We're first going to begin our lesson by talking about different techniques that you can use when using chalk pastels. And you will find that many of the terms that we use cross over from one medium to another. So the first thing we're going to do is blending. And when we blend, it's just like when we used colored pencils or oil pastels. So you're going to choose a color. I'm going to blend some yellow and red so we can make an orange. I've got a layer of yellow and I'm just going to slightly overlap. And then extend that. And you'll see that the colors blend together nicely without much effort. One thing I want to caution you about when using chalk pastels is you never want to wipe your paper, because what happens is the loose chalk will, and I'll show you, will smear on your paper like this. Now that's good if that's the effect that you're going for, but if that is not what you want to see happen, just blow it, the loose particles away. So that is very nicely blended right now. If you want to blend it a little further, you can use a Q-tip and just lightly go over the area that you want to blend. But it blends very nicely to the point that you really don't need to use a Q-tip if it's not necessary. We're also going to do cross hatching. Just like we've done in colored pencil, in oil pastel, in regular pencil. Cross hatching is just where you have your lines that go this way and your lines that go this way. You can create a darker value by coming in and adding more lines to the area that you want darker. A really cool thing about chalk pastels is that they are square in their shape. So you could take a pastel on its side and do flat edge coloring. So you could fill in large spaces that way just by laying it on its side. So we did cross hatching. Remember, we have hatching, and hatching is just the lines that are going one direction. If I want a darker value, I would fill it in a little more where I want that darker value. Next, we're going to layer. And layering is very much like blending, except for we're not really trying to create a new color. We are just putting colors on top of each other. So I'm going to go with a dark green and a light green. And I'm just going to layer those colors. And I'm filling in the spaces of white where I didn't fill in the first time. So it makes it a more solid appearance. You can also use the masking technique. Any kind of tape will work. Masking tape, if I could find the end of this roll. It's a new roll. The thing you need to think about when using tape for creating this masking effect is that you need to get some of the stickiness off the tape, and the easiest way to achieve that is by just putting it on your clothes and picking up some of those fibers. It'll take a little bit of the stickiness off of your tape. I'm just going to rip this little piece of tape in half and lay it down here on my paper. to show you this masking technique. All I'm going to do is color right on top of the tape and fill in the space in between that I left for that gap. And I'm going to come along the edge here so you can see this straight line that it makes. And remember to be careful when touching the paper with your hands because the chalk pastel is very loose and it will smear. So that is the masking technique. And we've got the traditional stippling, which of course is all those little tiny dots. So we did stippling in pointillism last week. We've done stippling in many of the mediums that we've worked with this year so far. And if you want a darker value, remember you just put your dots closer together. So that's how you would do stippling. And we have short strokes. So short strokes is really a little bit like pointillism, but it's just about making those little small marks on your paper and not necessarily trying to fill in a large area at a time. So you could take the corner of your chalk, that little edge makes a really cool square effect with your colors, and you just start to overlay. It's a quick movement. That's why it's called short strokes, because they're short and quick. And chalk pastels, as you can see, break very easily. But that's okay. You can still use them when they're broken. It's kind of like using a broken crayon. Alright, so those are the different techniques that you can try when you are working with chalk pastels. Now let's move on to our project for the week. In our artwork today, we are going to be creating a mountain scene of the Aurora Borealis over the mountains. So you're going to start with just a blank piece of copy paper is fine. And you're going to draw some mountains. So in this particular piece, this is going to be my ground, and we're going to label each piece because we're going to tear these apart, so we want to know which order they go in. So I don't want you to cut these with scissors because the rough torn edge looks nicer. Don't stress if you can't stay right on the line perfectly. It'll be okay. And we're just going to tear each of these lines apart that we've just drawn. Now I am working on black paper today. I'm going to give you an idea of what to do if all you have is white paper, but we're going to start with the black. So on my ground piece, I don't want to put any color down here on the ground because I want to leave this black. I want to see the bottom of this. However, you need to know kind of where you're working with, and I kind of want it to look like there's a little bit of snow on the ground. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this paper and move it out of the way. I'm going to take some white and I'm just going to color the edge of this paper. Now you don't need to go very far down onto the paper. About 1/4 of an inch is fine. And all you're doing is you're putting chalk. Oh, and look, there's another broken one on the edge of this. So once you have all your chalk on the edge of your paper, you're going to line it up with the bottom Now do keep in mind that you see how my paper is a little bit wider that I'm working with. That's okay. I'm going to take a Q-tip, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently brush the chalk off of the torn piece of paper onto the black paper. And lift. All right, so there is my ground level for my base of my picture. Now, number 1 should fit nicely above that. So I'm going to take and move my paper out of the way again. And the colors in the Aurora Borealis, if you've ever seen it or seen pictures of it, are these beautiful bright blues and greens and pinks, and those are the colors I want you to think about when you're doing this. And I want you to consider alternating colors so you have multiple colors on a line. So I'm going to do my first row in this green and blue, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to come down just like I did with the white, about 1/4 of an inch, but I'm going to change colors about every inch. And I'm going to alternate those all the way down the line. All right. Once you have got that all the way down the edge, you're going to bring your paper back over here. Set this down, and we're going to repeat that same process that we did with that first piece, just with the Q-tip. You're going to lightly brush that chalk onto your paper. And move that out of the way. And it looks like you have the lights shining from behind the mountains. I'm going to continue that process with these next pieces, and then we're going to have our finished piece. At this point, you can come in, you can add whatever details you want. So let's say you want to add some trees at the bottom down here. I would add them in black on black paper because the black pastel is intense and it will still show up on the black paper. So you could add some little trees. If you wanted to add some kind of little reflection on the bottom down here, let's say you want to pretend there's a pond, you could come in and draw yourself a line. Cover that kind of wide, lay your chalk on its side, and then you could take what's left over on these papers that you had, if you had any left over, and you could just brush some color reflection onto the water, or you could add some more color to it if you want to. I don't want it to be very intense, so I would just brush some of this excess onto it. Lastly, if you want to add any kind of stars in the sky or snow, the appearance of snowfall, you could do a couple of things. You could do stippling with a white, and if you wanted to make your mountains look like they were snow covered, you could come along here on the edge and just color in a little bit. Then take your Q-tip and smooth that out because you don't want to be such an intense line. The last thing I want to show you is how to add the look of stars or snow using paint and a brush. So there are two different ways that you can do this. If you don't like getting your hands dirty, you can take a stiff brush, put a little white paint on it, use another paintbrush or something hard to tap against, and just tap. That's going to give you some bigger areas. If you want small, tiny spots, you're going to take that stiff brush and you're just going to pull back with your finger. And that's going to give you smaller dots. It's going to spread out a little better and it'll be a little softer effect. That's how you would do that. And I think I'm just going to add a little moon up here in the corner. To finish it off. Gonna mix a little gray in there too so it's not so white. And blend that together. Remember I said that it blends really nicely, so you don't have to make a lot of effort. It's going to do the work for you. And I only want to use my Q-tip to kind of fill in where you can still see the paper and soften it up a little bit. And if you want to create that little haze around the moon, you can just lightly with your finger brush around that, and that'll create that little hazy effect. And you have finished your Aurora Borealis over the mountains picture. I'm going to show you another example of a way that you can do this, just so you have some different ideas. But I want to show you this picture done on white paper. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I want to show you what it could look like if all you have is white paper. So you would do the same thing as far as drawing it out and tearing your paper to do your chalk, but rather than have the white mountains, you would want to fill in your mountains. So you would want to either color it with marker or crayon or whatever you have on hand at home. I'm just using the side of this chalk pastel to kind of show you. And I'm going to just blend it a little bit with my finger. And then I would do that exact same thing with the paper. And I'm just reusing a paper that I have, but same effect. If you drew out your mountains first and you knew where they were gonna go, you could take that paper on white and you could do the same thing with white paper that I did on the black. Now, I do prefer the look of the black, but if all you have at home is white paper, then this will be sufficient. In this example, I did the exact same thing by drawing out my lines and tearing the paper. The only difference is I made the streaks go up and down like you're seeing the streaks in the sky going up. So you can choose to do this either way for your assignment in Canvas this week. Again, you can use the chalk pastels if you can get access to them, or you can use sidewalk chalk. And I want to show you real quick what it would look like if you used colored pencil. So the bigger difference in using colored pencil would be, instead of wiping the color off onto your paper, you obviously can't do that with colored pencil. So what you would need to do is have your torn piece of paper and your colored pencil, and you just color off the edge with light marks. And if you slightly lift your hand up at the end as you come up, it'll give you that soft feathered appearance of your colored pencil. You can also alternate colors just as if you would if you were using your chalk pastels. This will not work as well with markers. It will not have the same appearance if you use markers, but all of you should have colored pencils at home. If you can't get access to sidewalk chalk or regular chalk, that's what it's going to look like if you used colored pencil. So I'll accept any of those mediums for your assignment this week. There's one last thing I want to address in working with either chalk pastels or oil pastels. If you love these mediums, you do have to finish them where they don't smear, because oil pastels and chalk pastels do smear very easily when touched. So long term, there are a couple of options. These are two that I currently have in my classroom. I really love this brand. The one thing I want to advise is that if you're doing this in a classroom, take it outside to spray it, because it smells really awful, and we don't want to give the kids headaches and cause problems of them inhaling these fumes. If you're doing this outside, please use a well ventilated area. The smell does linger for a while. Don't get really close to your artwork when you are spraying it, because if you get it too wet, too close, it will mess up your picture. Do it from a distance, do an even coat over the whole thing, and it will protect your art so that you can have it for a long time. And as always, I can't wait to see my students work in Canvas. I look forward to every week seeing what you guys come up with. I love the creativity that you guys have. So I will see you next week on another lesson. Next week we're going to be talking about chalk pastels still, but we're going to be doing a different technique where we actually take away. So we're going to be learning about subtractive techniques next week. See you guys later.